Mark Evans was not a confrontational man by nature. At 42, he prided himself on being the kind of neighbor who would lend you his lawnmower without hesitation or bring in your mail when you were away. His modest two-bedroom home at the end of Willow Creek Lane wasn't flashy, but it was his sanctuary, a place where he could unwind after long shifts at the architectural firm where he'd worked for the past 15 years. The property featured a small vegetable garden that he tended with meticulous care, supplying him with fresh produce throughout the summer months. His water bill was always reasonable, and he'd never had issues with the pressure or supply. That all changed when Belinda Winters moved into the house next door. 3 weeks ago, the for sale sign had come down, and in its place arrived a convoy of moving trucks and landscapers. The prior owners, an elderly couple who had kept to themselves, had left the neighborhood for a retirement community in Florida. Mark had barely noticed their departure until the renovation crews showed up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, their hammers and power tools shattering the peaceful morning. "Progress waits for no one," Belinda had said when he politely inquired about the extensive renovations. She stood in her driveway, designer sunglasses perched on her head, manicured nails tapping against her smartphone case. "The previous owners let this place go to seed. I'm bringing it into the 21st century." Mark had nodded and retreated to his garden, hoping the construction would be completed quickly. But as days turned into weeks, the transformation next door became increasingly extravagant. A team installed a massive patio, complete with an outdoor kitchen that looked more expensive than Mark's entire house. Then came the crowning jewel, a state-of-the-art hot tub, large enough to accommodate at least 8 people, with color-changing LED lights and multiple jets. Mark had been in his garden harvesting tomatoes when the hot tub installation crew arrived. He watched with mild curiosity as they positioned the bulky fixture into place, connecting various pipes and electrical components. "That's quite the setup," he remarked to one of the workers. "Yeah, top-of-the-line model. Uses a lot of water, though. Hope you folks don't have any supply issues around here." Mark had shrugged. Never been a problem before. The first signs of trouble appeared 2 days later. Mark was in the shower when the water pressure suddenly dropped to a trickle. Puzzled, he finished rinsing off as best he could and checked his kitchen faucet. The same issue. Barely enough pressure to fill a glass. Outside, he discovered his garden hose produced nothing more than a sad drip. That evening, while watering his withering vegetables with collected rainwater, Mark noticed the unmistakable sound of rushing water and laughter coming from next door. Peering through the fence slats, he saw Belinda hosting what appeared to be a small gathering. Steam rose from her hot tub as her guests clinked champagne glasses. The next morning, Mark knocked on Belinda's door. When she answered, dressed in an expensive-looking silk robe, he raised his concerns about the water pressure. "I've been having issues since your hot tub was installed," he explained. "I'm wondering if there might be a connection." Belinda's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. "My plumber assured me everything was installed correctly. Perhaps you should check your own pipes. They're probably ancient, like the rest of your charming little place." Before Mark could respond, she closed the door. That afternoon, Mark called the city's water department. The technician who arrived seemed perplexed by the dramatic drop in pressure. "Something's not right," he said, examining the water meter. "According to this, your usage has somehow tripled in the past week, but you say you haven't changed your habits." Mark shook his head. "Not at all. If anything, I've been using less because of the pressure issues." The technician frowned. "I'd better check the connection to your neighbor's property. There might be some irregularity there." As they walked toward the property line, Mark had no idea that what they were about to discover would ignite a suburban water war unlike anything Willow Creek Lane had ever seen. "Well, I'll be damned," the water technician muttered, crouching near the property line where the main water lines branched off to serve both houses. He brushed away soil and debris, revealing what appeared to be a recently installed diversion valve. "Someone's done some unauthorized plumbing work here." Mark leaned in for a closer look. "What exactly am I looking at?" "This valve," the technician pointed to a brass fixture buried among the pipes, "shouldn't be here. It's diverting a significant portion of your water supply directly to your neighbor's property." He shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't just a mistake. This was deliberately installed." Mark's face flushed with anger. "So she's been stealing my water?" "Technically, yes. And based on how this is set up, I'd say whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This is the work of a professional plumber." The technician pulled out his phone and began taking photos. "This is highly illegal. You're paying for water that's being diverted to her property." Mark glanced toward Belinda's house, where the hot tub bubbled quietly in the afternoon sun. "Can you fix it?" "I can remove the diversion valve right now, but you should file a formal complaint with the city. You'll want documentation for your insurance company, too, especially if you decide to pursue compensation for the water bills." As the technician worked to restore the proper water flow, Mark's thoughts raced. He'd been paying triple his usual water bill to fill Belinda's hot tub, and water her newly installed exotic landscaping. The realization made his blood boil. Once the technician left, having restored the proper water connection and provided Mark with a detailed report of the tampering, Mark marched next door. He rang Belinda's doorbell 3 times before she answered. "Mark, isn't it?" She stood in the doorway, blocking his view inside. "Twice in one day? I hope this isn't going to become a habit." Mark held up the technician's report. "The water department found a diversion valve installed at our property line. It was redirecting my water to your house." Belinda's expression remained neutral, but her posture stiffened slightly. "I have no idea what you're talking about." The technician said it was professionally installed. "Did your plumber do this when they put in your hot tub?" She waved her hand dismissively. "I hired contractors to handle the renovations. I don't micromanage their work. If there was some mix-up with the plumbing, I'm sure it was an honest mistake." "A mistake?" Mark's voice rose. "This wasn't a mistake. Someone deliberately installed a valve to steal my water." "I think steal is a very strong word," Belinda replied coldly. "And frankly, I don't appreciate your tone or these accusations. If there was an issue, it's been fixed now, hasn't it? So I don't see the problem." "The problem is that I've been paying for your water usage for weeks. I want compensation for the extra charges on my bill." Belinda laughed, a sharp sound devoid of humor. "Good luck proving any of that was my doing. For all I know, you could have installed that valve yourself just to cause trouble." "Why would I?" "I think we're done here," she interrupted, starting to close the door. "If you have actual evidence that I personally directed someone to tamper with the water lines, feel free to take it up with my lawyer. Otherwise, I suggest you drop this petty neighborhood squabble." The door slammed in Mark's face. Mark stood there, stunned at her audacity. Through the window, he could see Belinda calmly pour herself a glass of wine before settling onto her couch, apparently unbothered by the confrontation. That evening, Mark reviewed his recent water bills and calculated that he'd overpaid by nearly $600 over the past 3 weeks. He filed a formal complaint with the city water department and sent a certified letter to Belinda requesting reimbursement. He also posted about the situation in the neighborhood's online forum, warning others to check their water bills if they lived near recent renovations. 3 days later, Belinda's response came, not in the form of an apology or a check, but as a cease and desist letter from her attorney, threatening legal action for defamation and harassment if Mark continued to spread false allegations about her. Mark took the letter to his friend Jason, who happened to be a paralegal. After reviewing the documents from the water department and the threatening letter, Jason shook his head. "Classic intimidation tactic," he said. "She's hoping you'll back down. The water department report clearly documents the tampering, but proving she specifically ordered it might be difficult. Did you notice any company names on the trucks when her plumbing was installed?" Mark nodded slowly, remembering the logo on the side of the van. Premium Plumbing Solutions. They were there for 2 days. The following morning, Mark was up before dawn. He'd spent half the night researching water quality testing procedures and regulations. As an architect, he had a solid understanding of residential plumbing systems, but he wanted to be absolutely certain his plan wouldn't cause any permanent damage or pose health risks. The last thing he needed was to give Belinda legitimate grounds for a lawsuit. He watched from his kitchen window as 2 city water quality inspectors arrived on the street. They were methodical, working their way from house to house, testing samples and checking connections. Mark had already prepared a pot of coffee and set out some store-bought muffins on a plate, ready to welcome them when they reached his property. "Morning, gentlemen," he greeted them warmly when they knocked. "Coffee? It's pretty chilly out there." The older of the 2 inspectors, whose name tag identified him as Harold, gratefully accepted a steaming mug. "Thanks. Been at this since 5 a.m. Your street got bumped to the top of the list after we found some unusual readings yesterday." "Unusual readings?" Mark feigned concern. "Should I be worried?" "Probably nothing to panic about," the younger inspector, Ben, explained as he took a bite of muffin. "But we found traces of coliform bacteria at the main junction that services this area. Could be from runoff, could be a small leak in the sewage line. We're checking every connection to pinpoint the source." Mark nodded solemnly. "Well, I'm glad you're being thorough. I've actually been having some water issues recently. The pressure was terrible until just a few days ago." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what changed?" "The water department found an illegal diversion valve at my property line," Mark explained, showing them the report. "My neighbor was siphoning off my water supply for her hot tub." The inspectors exchanged glances. "That's definitely not permitted," Harold said, examining the photos in the report. "And it could potentially create cross-contamination if not installed correctly." "Exactly what I was thinking," Mark agreed. "I was wondering if you could take a look at both our connections, just to make sure everything's safe now. I'm particularly concerned about backflow issues." "That's why we're here," Ben assured him. "We'll need to test both properties thoroughly." As they headed outside, Mark casually mentioned, "My neighbor Belinda might be a bit difficult. She didn't take it well when I discovered she was stealing my water. In fact, she sent me a cease and desist letter." Harold chuckled. "Don't worry about us. We have municipal authority to inspect all water connections, whether residents like it or not." Mark watched from his porch as the inspectors made their way to Belinda's house. As expected, she was less than welcoming, arms crossed defensively as she spoke to them at her door. Though we couldn't hear the conversation, her body language made it clear she wasn't offering them coffee and muffins. Nevertheless, the inspectors proceeded with their work, checking various points around her property. Mark noticed them paying particular attention to the hot tub's plumbing connections. After about 20 minutes, he saw Ben taking multiple water samples from different sources, labeling each vial carefully. When they returned to Mark's property to complete their inspection, Harold looked troubled. "Found something?" Mark asked innocently. "I'm not supposed to discuss specific findings before the report is filed," Harold said, glancing toward Belinda's house. "But let's just say there are some concerning issues with the plumbing configuration next door. The hot tub installation doesn't meet code in several areas, and there's no backflow prevention system installed, which is mandatory for that type of setup." "That sounds serious," Mark commented. "It is," Ben confirmed, packing up their testing kit. "Without proper backflow prevention, there's risk of contaminated water from the hot tub being siphoned back into the main water supply, especially during pressure drops." "Like the kind I was experiencing while she was stealing my water?" Mark asked. Harold nodded grimly. "Exactly like that. The department will be issuing a formal notice requiring immediate correction of these code violations. Until then," he hesitated. "Until then," Mark prompted, "we've collected samples for laboratory analysis, but based on our preliminary testing, we're mandating that the hot tub be drained and not refilled until the plumbing issues are resolved. We're also recommending a flush of her entire system." Mark struggled to keep his expression neutral. "I see. That sounds like quite an inconvenience." "Safety first," Harold shrugged. "We'll have the full test results in about 48 hours, but given what we've seen, I wouldn't be surprised if they show elevated bacteria levels in her hot tub water." Mark maintained his composure as Belinda fumed on his doorstep. "I'm not sure what you're accusing me of," he said calmly. "The city inspectors were checking everyone's water connections. That's their job." "Don't play innocent," Belinda snapped. "You tipped them off about my hot tub. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost me? The plumbers are saying I need a complete overhaul of the connection system and something called a backflow prevention device that costs thousands." Mark shrugged. "If your contractors had installed everything to code in the first place, you wouldn't be in this situation. And if they hadn't illegally diverted my water supply, the inspectors would never have had reason to look closely at your setup." "You can't prove I had anything to do with that valve," Belinda insisted, though her eyes flickered away from his momentarily. "Actually," Mark replied, reaching into his pocket, "I've been doing some research. I found these old photos on the neighborhood forum from before you moved in." He showed her his phone screen, displaying a picture of the previous owner's backyard party. "See this area where the valve was found? No diversion pipe then. Funny how it appeared right when your hot tub was installed." Belinda's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Photos can be manipulated. Besides, I've already spoken to my lawyer. He says I have grounds to sue you for harassment." "Reporting factual code violations is not harassment," Mark countered. "But you know what is illegal? Water theft. Tampering with municipal utility lines. Code violations that risk contaminating the neighborhood water supply. I wonder what a judge would make of all that." They stared at each other for a long moment before Belinda finally spoke, her voice dangerously quiet. "I have connections in this town that you couldn't imagine. My husband plays golf with the mayor. My brother-in-law sits on the zoning board. When I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd never crossed me." With that, she turned and stalked back to her house, leaving Mark wondering if he had underestimated his opponent. The next morning, Mark noticed a surveying crew on Belinda's property. They were taking measurements and placing stakes along the property line. The same area where the water connection had been tampered with. When he left for work, Belinda was standing in her driveway with a man in an expensive suit, pointing toward Mark's house and gesturing emphatically. That evening, Mark found an official notice taped to his front door. It was from the city zoning department, claiming that his garden shed was positioned 8 inches over the setback limit from the property line and had to be moved or demolished within 30 days. The shed had been in the same spot for over a decade without issue. "So that's how she wants to play it," Mark muttered, pulling out his phone to call Jason. Over the next week, Mark found himself battling on multiple fronts. First came a noise complaint about his air conditioning unit. Then the homeowners association suddenly decided his garden violated their aesthetic standards and demanded he remove his vegetable plants. The city sent an inspector to check his backyard drainage system. citing an anonymous tip about potential runoff issues. Each complaint was petty, inconvenient, and clearly orchestrated by Belinda, but none were significantly damaging until Mark received a certified letter from the county assessor's office announcing his property was being reassessed for tax purposes, with a preliminary estimate suggesting his property value had suddenly increased by 40%. "She's using her connections to harass you," Jason concluded when Mark showed him the growing stack of notices and letters. "Classic abuse of power, but there's something else that bothers me about this whole situation." "What's that?" Mark asked. "The way she immediately went nuclear with these tactics. Most people would have backed down after being caught stealing water or at least tried to make amends. But she's acting like you personally wronged her by exposing her misconduct." Mark frowned. "You think there's more to this than just the water?" "I think it's worth digging deeper," Jason replied. "People who react this defensively are usually hiding something bigger." That evening, Mark logged into the county property records database, a public resource he occasionally used for work, and began researching Belinda Winters. What he found made his eyebrows rise. Belinda and her husband Gregory had purchased the house next door through a shell company called Winter Gardens LLC. The same company owns 6 other properties in the area, all acquired within the last year. More interestingly, Winter Gardens had submitted planning applications for each property that included significant plumbing modifications and water feature installations. "She's not just doing this to me," Mark realized. "This is a pattern." Mark crossed his arms and stood his ground despite the intimidating presence of Gregory Winters. "I'm not interested in making anything go away," he replied firmly. "What you and your wife have been doing is illegal." Gregory's smile was thin and practiced. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Evans. Name yours. 100,000? 200? We can make the citations against your property disappear as easily as they appeared. So you're admitting to using your influence to harass me?" Gregory waved his hand dismissively. "Let's not get caught up in details. The fact is, you become an inconvenience to our business operations. I'm prepared to compensate you generously for that inconvenience, provided you issue a public retraction of your statements at the council meeting." "And if I refuse?" The developer's smile vanished. "Then the inconveniences you've experienced so far will seem trivial by comparison. We have resources you can't imagine, Mr. Evans. Do you really want to test how far we're willing to go?" Mark was about to respond when a car pulled up beside them. To his surprise, he recognized Harold, the water quality inspector, along with a woman in a dark suit who flashed a badge. "Gregory Winters," the woman called out. "I'm Special Agent Monica Perez with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. We'd like to ask you some questions about Water Gardens LLC and your relationships with certain city officials." The color drained from Gregory's face. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was just having a friendly conversation with my neighbor here." "Really?" Agent Perez raised an eyebrow, because our surveillance equipment picked up what sounded remarkably like attempted bribery and threats. Mark's jaw dropped. "Surveillance equipment?" Harold stepped forward. "After our inspection last week, we found similar water diversion setups at 2 other properties owned by Mr. Winters' company. Given the pattern and the potential public health risks, we contacted federal authorities." He turned to Mark. "When you spoke at the council meeting, we were already building a case." Over the next hour, Mark watched from his porch as FBI agents executed search warrants on Belinda's house and the Winters' other properties in the neighborhood. Neighbors gathered on their lawns, whispering and pointing as documents and electronic devices were carried out in evidence boxes. By nightfall, the local news was reporting that Gregory and Belinda Winters had been taken in for questioning regarding allegations of water theft, public utility tampering, and potential bribery of public officials. The mayor had announced a temporary leave of absence pending investigation of his ties to the Winters Development Company. 2 weeks later, Mark sat in his living room with Jason, watching the press conference where the district attorney announced formal charges against the Winters and 3 city officials. The investigation has uncovered a sophisticated scheme to defraud the city water utility, the DA explained to the assembled reporters. By illegally diverting water from neighboring properties to their own high-consumption installations, the defendants avoided thousands of dollars in water charges while simultaneously draining resources from adjacent households. Jason shook his head in disbelief. "And to think this all started because of a hot tub." "It wasn't just about the hot tub," Mark replied. "According to what Agent Perez told me, they were using these properties as a proof of concept for a much bigger scheme. The development deal Gregory secured near the water treatment facility would have allowed them to divert massive amounts of water to their luxury condos while billing the city. They could have stolen millions of dollars worth of water over time, all while leaving regular homeowners with the bill and potential water contamination issues," Jason added. "It's almost impressive how brazen they were." "Greed makes people stupid," Mark observed. "They thought their connections would protect them." The following month brought resolution on multiple fronts. The city dismissed all the citations against Mark's property and issued him a formal apology along with a refund for the excess water charges he paid. Winter Gardens LLC was dissolved and the properties were put up for sale by court order. Most satisfying of all, Belinda's hot tub was permanently removed as part of the remediation of the illegal plumbing modifications. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Mark was tending to his rejuvenated vegetable garden when a moving truck pulled up to Belinda's house. A young couple emerged, looking excited as they surveyed their new home. Mark wiped his hands on his jeans and walked over to introduce himself. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Mark Evans.